¿Cómo el ejercicio de este informe ayuda a la meta de que la Junta termine su función?
The balanced budget parts. So it's important that we have, one of the things that this highlights is important, which is the balance budgets have to be something that's happening organically by the government itself. It can't be that the board has to say, legislature passes things, then get passed, and then we say, no, this overspends, or we can't afford to pay for this, or we can't afford to pay for that, right? And then we have to get into this push and pull. What should be happening is we all just work together and we figure out what balanced budgets are. And then at the end of the year, if there's a new priority, we agree on spending it. When we talk about restoring fiscal responsibility, I don't think the concept is we pass things and spend and then the board says no and that's how you bring it into balance. I think the goal is the legislature working together with the governor, working together is also passing bills. Ideally, we wouldn't have to be, saying no to things, right? Ideally, it would just be, this is within the budget, we all agree, and we've depoliticized the budget and we're just spending. So the reason we highlight some of these issues, because the education part I talked about and some of the others, because those things are going to lead to imbalance unless we figure it out now. Or the government's going to have the will then to make reductions in these programs, just based on the revenues, right? I don't want to be in the business of saying we should do this, we should do that, we should do something else. What we really should be in the business of saying, how much resources do we have, right? Is this the proper allocation of funds to make sure that we're in balance over the years? This, I think, starts that dialogue, because if you can stay in balance over the 5-year period with your spending commitments today don't bring you out of balance in the future, that shows that the government can stay in long-term balance. That, I think, helps the dialogue and starts to show that the government has now staying within balance, and the board no longer needs to be saying no to things, and we're back on track.
¿Qué por ciento de las reformas que ustedes han estado pidiendo al gobierno consecutivamente en los planes fiscales, de operación, y de reporting y todo eso, más o menos qué por ciento en efecto se han implantado?
I can't say that I have a percentage, that they've done. I'm very focused now on the financial management side of what needs to happen. If I think about it in four different steps that need to get done. If you think about it that way, you had the debt was unaffordable. People of Puerto Rico would never have been able to repay the amount of debt that was issued. That has been reduced dramatically. That's a success. And we still have PREPA that's outstanding. So that's number one. That was number one. Number two was those charts that I showed you in the beginning. Spending was far outpacing revenues. We brought that into line. So now we are controlling it, right? So we're bringing in line, spending is now lined up with revenues more appropriately. So those two pieces, 3 and 4, are restoring fiscal responsibility. So now, do we have proper financial management and the systems in place in order to make sure that the fiscal responsibility that we have today is sustainable over the long term? That's not done. That's not done. The biggest example of that not being done is you pass a budget on June 31st, and before 4 or 5 months later, you spend another $1 billion outside of the budget. That's not fiscally responsible, right? So that needs to happen. We need to make sure, whether it's systems there are systems in place, laws in place that kind of institutionalize the fiscal responsibility. And then the last piece is economic growth, right? You need to have the federal funds. On that chart, I didn't mention this before, I call it opportunity and risk, because the federal funds are enormous opportunity, because it helps to grow the economy. But underneath that, we need economic growth. So right now, we're in the period of now working with the government, kind of what do we need to do to have economic growth? So when the federal funds finish, we have something underneath it that's supporting it. And those pieces are still left. So I would say the two pieces that are left, fiscal responsibility, financial management, and what do we need to do in economic growth? And that goes to tax reform. What we saw this year was there was some tax reductions that were proposed. We don't think it was affordable, and we also don't think that it necessarily was going to contribute to economic growth. And we only have one shot at doing something like that. So we want to work with the government this year to figure out how can we do, we can either use the tax code and do other things to provide for economic growth. So when the federal funds come off, you have growth. So those are the things that are left. There are other things in the fiscal plan, obviously, right, that are left, but these are some of the major pieces.